Hello and welcome to Mr. C History. Now, this rather lovely Italianate mansion is Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. This was the favourite home of Queen Victoria, and indeed it was here in 1901 where she died, ending her remarkable 64-year reign. In this video, I want to take you through those final days, her death at Osborne, the extraordinary journey her body took back to Windsor, the grandeur of her funeral, and the secret she was buried with. Now, as I said, Osborne House was Queen Victoria's favourite residence. She thought Buckingham Palace was ugly and preferred the seclusion that her island retreat gave her. Osborne was also deeply personal. The house and gardens were designed by her beloved husband, Prince Albert, and the place reminded her constantly of him. In her later years, and especially as her health declined, she increasingly withdrew from public life, spending most of her time here at Osborne. Queen Victoria had her last Christmas here in December 1900, and she hadn't been well. She had rheumatism in her legs and she had really bad cataracts. Essentially, she was blind. And sure enough, by mid-January of 1901, she suffered a stroke, what her doctor said, a paralytic stroke. She was confined to her bedroom. And eventually on the 21st of January at 6:30 p.m. in her bedroom, she died there. And you can go visit that bedchamber now. At her side was her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, now the King, Edward VII. And also interesting by her bedside was her favourite grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. Her son very quickly sent a telegram to the Mayor of London saying, "My dearest mother has passed away," and the bells rang out across the nation. And also apparently a lot of the haberdashers and tailors said they ran out of black clothing because so many people were mourning. Reactions went around the world, mourning in India, and indeed the Sydney Herald said the world has shaken today. It got all the way to Australia. But back here in Osborne, they didn't know quite what to do. She lay in state, interestingly, in the dining room, rather than the grand cathedrals or halls or anything like that. In the dining room she was there, and they needed to hatch a plan. How were they going to get her body from here in Osborne House to be alongside her husband, Prince Albert, at Windsor? And that plan included getting to the mainland, back off the Isle of Wight. And like me, Queen Victoria had to cross the Solent. And so her coffin was put on a gun carriage, taken the very short journey to East Cowes, and she was put on the royal yacht HMY Alberta for the quite short crossing to Gosport or Portsmouth just over there. It was the 1st of February, so the conditions weren't brilliant, grey and dark, and I think it was not too choppy, but still not amazing. But the sight was spectacular. On her port side was lots of naval battleships, and on her starboard side actually were some foreign ships from Kaiser Wilhelm had ordered some of his boats to accompany her. So in a huge flotilla across the Solent on a very solemn occasion. On the morning of the 2nd of February 1901, Queen Victoria's coffin was taken off the boat at Gosport and put on a train and taken here, of course, to London Victoria Station, the station named after her. The train was provided by the London and South Western Railway, and when it got here it was taken off the train and put on a horse-drawn gun carriage, a very momentous procession. Now, Queen Victoria's wishes that there was going to be no funeral here in London. Usually royal funerals are at Westminster Abbey, but she said no, she wanted to get to Windsor, which meant the body or the coffin had to go from here, Victoria, all the way to Paddington. And how is it going to do that? Well, by gun carriage. The gun carriage didn't take a direct route because, of course, it had to go past Buckingham Palace, because out here, right in the front, all the way along here, was the staff, Queen Victoria's staff here at Buckingham Palace. The gun carriage came by so that they could pay their last respects. The same thing that happened at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Of course, the Victoria Monument was not built at the time, so she couldn't look down on herself. Eventually, the gun carriage procession was brought here, its final London stop, Paddington Station. Now, apparently it wasn't as busy as today, and it usually did get very busy, but it was very calm, very sombre and solemn, and there were black drapes all hung around the windows. And it was here, quietly and reverentially, the coffin was taken from the gun carriage and put onto the royal train, which was being pulled by a specially commissioned locomotive known as the Royal Sovereign, Great Western Railway train to Windsor. There was some great symbolism though. This huge Victorian span, this obviously station was built along with the Great Western Railway by Isambard Kingdom Brunel, that great Victorian. So what a symbolic place to end the Victorian age, here in this massive monolith, amazing symbol and monument to Victoriana. After her journey from Paddington, she arrived here at Windsor at the station that's just down there, and once again her coffin was loaded onto a horse-drawn gun carriage and brought the short distance along here to the castle. But crisis almost struck at this hill here, the entrance into the castle, where the horses who were pulling the gun carriage just stopped and refused to go up the hill. So a quick thinking officer issued an order out to some men, some Navy blue jackets, naval officers and cadets who were nearby. He ordered them to grab a rope and drag the coffin up the hill to the church. What's interesting about this, the King, Edward VII, was so impressed by this that he said, I'll have the same at my funeral, and actually that has now been every royal funeral since. The same thing has happened. The gun carriage, the last bit, has been pulled by Navy officers. So anyway, they delivered her safely to St George's Chapel in the heart of Windsor Castle. Now, most royal funerals take place at Westminster Abbey, but at her insistence, Queen Victoria's funeral was at Windsor, at St George's Chapel, the chapel inside Windsor. But just because it was here doesn't mean it wasn't grand and opulent. Queen Victoria had 9 children and countless grandchildren. She was nicknamed the Grandmother of Europe. They'd all intermarried into the royal families of Europe. So there were dignitaries and people representation. All the royal families of Europe were here at the funeral. There were members of the Portuguese royal family, the Danish one, the Greek one, the Russian. Of course, Kaiser Wilhelm, the Kaiser of Germany, was here. Even Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, he was here, and he's going to become very significant in history later on. Many other dignitaries, the Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury was here, and even Maharajas and princes of Indian states were here. It was a grand occasion, a conference, as it were, of royals. Another thing that Queen Victoria insisted on was that she wanted the dominant colour of her funeral to be white. Interestingly, for a woman who wore black because of mourning for her husband for most of her life, apparently she didn't like black that much, so she insisted the horses were draped in white. She wanted white flowers, and the pall, the drape that goes over her coffin, was also white. So a white funeral. Now this is the closest a mere mortal like me can get to the Frogmore Estate in Windsor. And just through the railings there, you can just about see a mausoleum with a green roof. That is the Royal Mausoleum, the final resting place of Queen Victoria. Interestingly, after the funeral, her body lay in state for 2 days there. It wasn't until the 4th of February 1901 that it was brought the short journey from the castle, from the chapel just up there, through Windsor Great Park here, once again on horse-drawn gun carriage. It wasn't in silence though. This was really notable for its music. The Black Watch and their pipers, good traditional pipers in a royal funeral, and also some music by Arthur Sullivan, that great Victorian of Gilbert and Sullivan fame. But anyway, she was brought here and put in the Royal Mausoleum where her mother was, and of course her husband, Prince Albert, who died 40 years ago. The only other thing to say about her burial, which is really interesting, is what she is buried with. She's buried with Prince Albert's dressing gown, okay? She's also buried with a plaster cast of his hand, fine, but it was what was in her left hand that was very interesting and slightly controversial. Upon her insistence, a doctor had slipped into her left hand a lock of John Brown's hair and the ring of John Brown's mother. Who was John Brown? He was the gillie, the groundskeeper at Balmoral Castle, who after the death of Prince Albert had formed a very strong relationship, a bond, a friendship with Queen Victoria. How far did that relationship go? Speculation. But it was clearly very meaningful and very powerful if she's buried with a lock of his hair.
Oh, interesting that. Also, that was hidden from the family, so they didn't know. It was hidden behind some flowers. It wasn't until afterwards, where the doctor spoke about it, that they found out about it. Really interesting. But since then, she's been laid to rest there. And it kind of breaks the tradition. She's not buried in a church like many other kings and queens have been. And she's buried privately. You can't go and visit that site. So she really is resting in peace there. So a good place for me to end. Now, obviously, this has been very interesting. Lots of little interesting details about her funeral. But it is the symbology of it. It's the end, quite literally, of an era. The Victorian era and the beginning of a new one, the Edwardian era. It's also the dates interesting. Right at the beginning of the 20th century. A goodbye to the 19th century Britain, powerful and dominant, industrial, etc. Now to a new century, the 20th century. How will Britain go on without its queen for 64 years? Anyway, as always, I hope you've enjoyed that. Please let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.